Hello, Authentically Me Beauties. It is an honor to be here with you today and each and every day that we are here together. I want to start with gratitude for you being here, listening, tuning in, and deciding to invest this time and energy in yourself. For the month of February, I'm focusing on dating, sex, relationships, just sharing vulnerably, authentically about that, about what has surfaced for me in my life. And I'm also inviting on some beautiful guests who are experts in their particular area of this realm. And so I am so excited, with that being said, to have Karyn with us here today. She has a unique element that hasn't been touched on yet so far this month. And so with that being said, Karyn, will you introduce yourself and just tell my listeners what it is you do? What is your niche?
Hi, well, thank you very much for inviting me onto your podcast or your show. I appreciate the chance to talk about what I do, and I appreciate any opportunity I have to connect with people who are interested in this topic. And so I consider myself a sex therapist and intimacy coach. And I work primarily with people who have decided that they have a loving relationship, but they would love to create more passion and more intensity in their sex life so that they can have so that their relationship can continue to grow and thrive and last as long as they desire it to last. Now I focus a little bit more on relationships that are a little outside of the cultural norm, right? So our cultural norm tends to be man, woman, monogamy, life together forever, right? And so we do have like a large population that likes to have a relationship outside of that. So that can be, I'm sorry, my cat just entered the room. So that could be, it could be woman, woman, it could be man, woman, it could be man, man, woman, it could be woman, woman, man in a relationship. It could be a polyamorous relationship. It could be a relationship that is considered lifestyle, in which people like open their relationship up to other people, but they stay in their primary monogamous or monogamish group. They call it monogamish because they are having sex with other people, but they are continuing to be committed to each other and sexually attached to each other. So it's kind of like a bit of a wide range, but it is kind of like a smaller niche in that it's a smaller population, but it's pretty much anybody who considers themselves outside of the cultural norm, right? And that I have experience with that, and I've worked with a lot of people who are opening up their relationship, and every now and again I will have something that's a little bit different, which is cool, and then I can learn while I'm helping them, because the basics are pretty much the same. You know, your sexuality belongs to you. Only you know what is authentically true and right for you, and you have the right to desire that. There's no shame around that. And I help people kind of release those shackles that culture has given us around our sexuality, and find ways of being who they really are and what they really want to be. And then in couplehood, negotiating, how does that work when there's two people? And that's where it really gets complicated, is when you have two people trying to be their authentic selves sexually.
Yeah, thank you so much for that. My goodness. And for doing what it is that you do. I feel like everybody could benefit from upgrading their sex life and that part of their person and their experience of this life. There's so much magic in sex and in sexuality and sexual expression. And for me personally, it's an area of this self-development journey, if you will, that is more new. You know, I've been on the personal development vibe for a number of years now. And so part of why I wanted to focus on this is because it's something that I'm really becoming an active participant in my own life. And there's so much to talk about and, discover. And people don't know because we were taught to not talk about sex and to not express those parts of ourselves. And it is varying degrees of this, from, what you should or shouldn't wear to who you should or shouldn't be with sexually. And so, even right now, like on my personal Facebook page, like I post nude photos and push the edges of our cultural, norm and society and the taboos and stuff surrounding sexuality. I'm a very sexual person, and I think it's so healthy to do that. And I even still to this day will receive at times like shame from others regarding that expression and regarding being who I am. And so, because you spoke to all of this, and it seems to be something that's very relevant, I know not just for myself, I know so many people can relate to that. What advice would you give people who are breaking through the shaming? How does one break through that within themselves? And then when they're faced with that from others, shall they be
Mm.
faced with that?
Yes, very good question. And absolutely, it certainly does happen um, to most people. And I don't want to say that to frighten people and make them afraid, because we already are worried about it and we are already scared of it and we don't know if it's going to happen. But it is good to be prepared, because it does happen. And I think it's because, and we don't have to get into too much like why other people do what they do, but it's partly because the other people hold on to their own shame, and they have their own desires, and they have their own fears around their desires, and then they project it onto somebody who is like stepping out of their fear, right? So if I have some bisexual kind of desires within me, but I'm suppressing that out of shame, and then I see somebody I know who I've always identified as heterosexual stepping into their bisexuality, I'm going to have some fear around that. It's going to trigger my own fears and my own shames around it, and then I project it onto somebody else. So it's really important. I'm sorry, it's really important for people to understand that it isn't about them in the first place, right? Like what comes to you when you've expressed yourself and been authentic and shown yourself, and somebody tries to shame you, it has nothing to do with you. Our automatic response is to like go and look at what we've done, and have I done something bad? Did I do something wrong? Is it a bad thing? Have I hurt somebody else in this process? And you can do that. That's certainly good to do some self-reflection, but most of the time it has nothing to do with you. It has to do with some of their shadows that you have triggered within them, right? And so most people I talk to, they do have family members. And I think that's even harder, right? Like it's hard to be in the public like you are and getting strangers, throwing hate darts at you. But in people's everyday life, they will get that from their family members. They'll get it from close family members, people who they expect to support them and love them. But sometimes those people are dealing with their own issues and their own fears and worries and shames, and so they will project that on. And so it's just grounding into yourself, getting like really grounded into who you are.
Mm-hmm.
um, People don't step out into that realm without some like serious reflection and some like true understanding of who they
Mm-hmm.
are. It's not an easy thing to step out and do something that's culturally outside of the norm. It's a hard thing to do, and so just like go back and acknowledge to yourself that this is who you really are, and how other people are responding to it is their journey. And it's
Mm-hmm.
like a serious grounding into the depth of who you are, and allowing yourself to continue to walk the path that you're intended to walk,
Mm-hmm.
without the distraction of what other people are grappling with in their own bodies.
I love that. Like keep doing it, you know? And I would add to that and say, follow and connect with humans like yourself and myself who are pushing those edges. So knowing that you're not alone, right? And that it's okay to do that, I feel like is really important, that we connect and support each other and lift each other up on this path, and especially in this. So thank you so much for that answer. That was so eloquently put, if I do say so. I loved it. I love
Thank you.
listening to you. It's great. I'm like very excited for these questions. I'm like really pumped. So what is your story? Like, when did you know, yeah, I'm gonna do this sex therapy thing? You know, what encouraged that? I think that it's really interesting to understand what has brought you to be where you are.
Good question. So I have a pretty long journey. I kind of like I grew up on a farm in Saskatchewan, Canada, right? And it was in the 70s that I grew up as a child, and so like my parents were really young people, and they were in their 70s, and my dad was an immigrant from Germany, and my mom was a little French speaking girl from the prairies, and here they found themselves in the 70s in this like new age um, of, of love and sex freedom, right? And so they were exploring all of that, yeah, way back in the 70s, and kind of experiencing that. And so I kind of grew up in a very, it was a complex, sex positive yet restrictive childhood, because we were Catholic. We grew up Catholic. We went to church every Sunday, and we had all these Catholic teachings. And yet my parents were having parties on the weekends, and people were, you know, very open, and you know, as children we'd be like watching from our rooms, peeking and looking at what was going on, and my parents
Just to be
never.
clear, are these like regular party gatherings or are these like sex parties?
These were regular party gatherings, but people would get drunk, and people would, you know, like I picked up on that, like, that's not his wife, right? So I picked up that people were very kind of open that way. Um, and and then yet I'd see them on Sunday morning in church. And the church,
Confusing for a child, yeah.
it was. And so, yeah, so I grew up like thinking that sex was good, like it was like a positive thing. But my mom was also still pretty shy about it, and pretty like, she'd be like, oh, you know, she would be kind of flustered, you know, talking about it and stuff. But my dad was like pretty open, and like, I don't know, back in the 70s, there was like weird things, like they'd have like pens or shot glasses where like the lady's dress would fall off when you put it upside down and stuff. It was like this like really innocent, like kind of like exploration at that time of sexuality. And so because these things were around, I was given the message that sex is good, it's a nice thing, it's a good thing. And then at church I was told, like, you know, you couldn't have sex outside of marriage, and you know that it was a sin and to have sex outside of marriage and all this kind of stuff. So, you know, I had this like complex kind of understanding of it. So I kind of grew up thinking, well, it must be for marriage, and then it's okay, right? And so then as I got into my teens, I think very naturally I'm a very sexual person, and my body was just completely open, and my body was like so ready as I was maturing and becoming a sexual person. I was so ready to experience like whatever it is my body could experience. And I had this like incredible crush on this boy. I was 13. I had a crush on a 14-year-old boy, and you know, he came out to the farm, and we went out, and it's so cliche, but we went out into the barnyard, and we were making out, and we were having like a really lovely makeout session, and I was like completely flowing with it. I was feeling very alive, and I let him finger me, and it felt so good, and I loved it. And then he's the one who put a stop to it, because I didn't even know I didn't know where it was leading. I was so innocent. And we got back, and he called me a slut. Ugh. And so my whole body retracted with that. Like, my body was like ready and alive, and feeling like this was such a beautiful exchange, and then being called a slut, like, it was traumatic for my body, and I retracted sexually from that. And so it took me a long time after that to allow that part of my body to come alive again. And I don't know if it did for many, many years. And then, I did have a situation where I was date raped when I was 16, which further shut me down. And then as I continued to mature and grow and explore, I had various experiences. And then I met my husband, and we got married, and it kind of came back. It was like, okay, so this is for marriage, right? This is what it's for. And so I was in the marriage, and it was like, sex was really great. And meanwhile, I was getting my social work degree. I felt like I had a calling. I felt like I had a mission to help people. And one of my very first professional jobs as a social worker was working with women and children who had been sexually assaulted, sexually abused. And so I was very interested in this whole topic. I'm a very sexual person. And so, like, I was dealing with what was going on in my body. And at one point in my social work classes, I had this like amazing teacher, and she was the only known sex therapist in the city where I was going to school. And she taught a class on sexuality, and I just loved it. And I saw her, and I was like, I want to be her one day. And at the time there was Dr. Ruth, and I was like, I want to be Dr. Ruth one day. And there was Sue Johansson, who was doing the Saturday Night Sex Show, and I was like, I want to be that someday. So I started to like really put a lot of interest in that, but like I had to like pay bills, so I just continued to do social work in a variety of different areas. And so I was moving up and doing social work in different places and getting a lot of experience. And then I decided to get my master's degree because I wanted to be a therapist. I wanted to do private work. And I didn't know yet then at the time where I wanted to do it. And took me quite a while to get my master's degree done. And as I was like finishing up my master's degree, I was talking with a friend of mine who was a yoga teacher in the city. And we were talking about sexuality and stuff. And I said that I wanted to be a sex therapist, and I didn't know where to, go and get certification specifically for that.
Mm-hmm.
And she introduced me to Layla Martin, who was doing her very first sex, love, and relationships certification. And so I looked at that, and I thought, with my master's degree and this certification, it's such a broad spectrum of understanding sexuality. And so I took the course, and then I worked for Layla for 2 years mentoring her students. And so in that process, that created where I am now as a sex therapist. And along the ways, I've done lots of my own personal exploration, divorced twice, have like entered into a lot of those different communities to explore and find out where my own sexuality lies.
Mm-hmm.
But that's kind of my long journey to where I'm at.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that with me and with my listeners. I really appreciate that. And it's in sharing of our stories, I think, that we really connect with one another and can relate. And so I know that, even myself, I can relate to some of what you've shared. And like, I'm working on forgiveness surrounding Catholicism myself. And it seems to me, from what I've learned and explored and talked about with others, that that particular religion carries with it a lot of sexual traumas and repression. And this may be a general statement, but that's just what my personal experience has been. And I grew up in a Catholic family, and my grandfather actually raped my aunts, and he molested me when I was 12. And my grandmother actually told me that I was a slut and that I was like asking for it and stuff. Um, so it was a very traumatic thing to experience. And my family was very much like, don't tell anybody, don't talk about it. This never happened. And I was like, fuck you guys. This did fucking happen. And I'm going to talk about it and make you uncomfortable. And it's been a huge part of my journey and my spiritual path, um and it's a shifted a lot in my relationships with my family and continues to play an active role, because the more that I step into my truth and my power, I understand it. Of course, I understand where everybody is coming from. And, like you said in the beginning, they want to use their voices and say, fuck you guys too. And so they see me doing that and it's like, oh God, what is she doing? How can she do this? Like, what is happening? And so I get it and I love them for where they are. And, I get to just remember that and love them and continue on my journey. And I just recently this week shared that story with a wonderful older gentleman that I met at a bar, who he was raised Catholic and he's married and is gay and is like in the marriage and is gay and is so afraid to speak about it, to do anything with that, and a bar setting is not ideal for a spiritual life coaching session, so I kept it um, pretty focused as much as I could and just encouraged him to embrace who he was and things of that nature. But I'm very curious, like, what your feedback would have been, or perhaps if you were me sitting at that bar speaking to this man who was just so afraid of what his family would say. I shared with him my journey and went a little bit deeper into it in hopes to empower him, but I'm not a sex worker. Like, I'm not a sex therapist. I'm a spiritual life coach, and I know it's all connected. But I'm just so curious, like, what your feedback is and what you would have said or done in that situation. Or what would you say to people who may be in that situation? Because it
Yeah,
exists.
yeah, it totally does. And I do get clients in those types of situations. And um, just as an aside, I have like really, really tight boundaries. And so I wouldn't go into any of that in a bar setting. Not that there was anything wrong with how, the communication and the connection that you were making, but because of my profession and because this is, what I work with, I have boundaries, and I wouldn't, but I would, I'd maybe give my card, or I would, give some kind of a lifeline that, if you need help, let me know. I'll connect you with somebody, or, you can come and see me. So that's what I would do exactly in that setting. But like, to more answer your question, what you're asking, I think, so he's married to a woman, I take it.
Mm-hmm.
And it's still a secret to her. Is that right too? So if somebody came to me in that situation, and I've had lots of people actually come to me, and it's funny because they will come in and they are actually still repressing it. They come in because maybe they're feeling depression, or they come in because they're feeling anxiety, or they come in because they're feeling there's a problem in their marriage. And that's what they start with. It's almost like they're feeling me out almost unconsciously, because like they've walked through this life suppressing their truth every day for as many years as they've been alive. And so to just like sit down in my office and to just like, oh yeah, this is who I am, is not easy. And so I can usually pick out those people, and I just kind of let them flow in what they're talking about. And then I ask just like the odd little probing question until we finally do get out like what it is. And there's this tool that I use and that I was taught, and it's called Five Senses Reality. And in the Five Senses Reality, we do some breath work and we do some meditation, and we go into this like really deep state where people really get in touch with what their soul is telling them, and move them to a point in time when they're free of the of the shackles, really, that's keeping them from being who they really are, and in a meditative state bring them there and help them to see, feel, taste what that feels like, and what's going on around them, and what does that look like. And once they kind of get a taste of that and they see that it's possible, then we go back and we say, okay, so what's obstructing you from getting there? We go back, what's stopping you? What is there? A fear? Is there a barrier? Is there a resistance to going there? And what is that? And that's where we start our work. And so often, we do say it's society, it's culture, it's the people in our lives, but we need to start deeper. And where is that fear? Where is that blockage? Where is that resistance to accepting first who you are personally and loving that, and then being able to bring that out and walk it, right? So the first part, you have to love that part of you. You have to embrace it, and you have to accept it, because you can't walk around with that on the outside of your skin if you don't love it yourself.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. That's really beautiful. Thank you for sharing that. And I honor you and your boundaries and your expression and that practice. I think that that's really beautiful. And I'm sure that it's extremely helpful for people too. And it's not something that, you have one conversation with somebody, bar or in the office or whatever, and it's like, oh, okay, we're good now. It's something that takes time and energy and effort. And so, um, yeah, I'm just happy that you exist and you're able to provide that support and loving space for other people.
Thank you. Yeah, I feel very grateful to have been placed where I've been placed, so that I have learned the things I have learned, so that I can be there for people who need me. I do feel like I sometimes say like a tool, or I am, the divine has placed me here for its healing of others, right? And so it's just like the healing comes through me, and I just have the tools to help them get there, because we are working with the conscious mind as well, right? And so trying to like, integrate it all into who they are. So yeah, I'm very grateful to be able to do what I do as well.
Mhm. So for the sake of being vulnerable with you and with my listeners, um, you said something about like humans getting flustered when they talk about sex or whatever in regards to this. And I am noticing that I myself will get that flustered feeling, and a little frustrated. I'm more curious than I am frustrated, but I'm mildly frustrated and extremely curious on why that exists and how to break through it. Like when I'm having conversations with potential partners or sometimes even friends and stuff, I'll have to like take a moment and I'm like, oh God, I'm so nervous. Like, what am I really going to talk about this and share this part of and I have to like take a second and collect myself. And I really would love to just be strong in my desires and who I am. And so I'm like, I don't know how to break through that and to not be in that flustered space. And so I'm curious, like, what advice would you have for me and anyone else that can relate to this?
Well, I'm curious. I'm interested, for with you, because we all come from a different place. We all have something different that's going on with us. But for you, um, where do you feel that in your body when you get that flustered? And maybe if you would just take a minute to kind of like close your eyes, take some breaths into your body, feel into a situation where you feel flustered, and just take a moment to breathe and locate where in your body you find that. And when you find where it is, if you could just put your hand there and just name it for me, where do you feel that in your body, that flustered feeling when you start to share about your sexuality or talk about sexuality?
I would say it's in my gut.
Okay. So if you can kind of breathe into that spot in your gut, keep a hand where it is, breathe into that spot. And I want you to maybe ask it, what does it need from you right now? And if I invite you to share with us what comes up for you when you ask, what do you need from me right now?
Yeah, so I feel like on the edge of tears, and I feel like a desire to throw to throw up. And I believe that this is residual energy in my body from like sexual traumas that I have experienced, because I learned at a young age that the shadow side of sex, that sex could be bad. I was raped when I was 4, and have had a number of different sexual traumas happen. And so, yeah, it just feels like I want to throw up.
Mm-hmm. So first of all, I just want to ask, do you feel safe with us exploring that right now in this space? Or would you like to like put it into more of an intellectual realm? What feels authentic to you in this moment, in this space?
um, I feel very open to the flow of whatever is to unfold.
Okay.
Mhm.
So if you can go back to that spot where you felt like throwing up, that spot where you felt the tears kind of starting to come, and breathe into it. And if you can try and stay there and not go into your head and explain, analyze, or describe what it is in your head, go into the spot where the sensation is and find that part of you that feels like throwing up, that feels like crying, that feels very intensely around this emotion, around sexuality, and try to understand whether this is like a childlike quality within you. Is it a part of you that feels really young? Is it a part of you that feels really wise? See if you can describe what are some of the essences around that piece of you that feels that sensation of like it wants to cry or throw up.
It's definitely a childlike part of me.
Okay. So if we were to put like skin and bones and flesh and blood and hair and clothing on this child, can you describe what she might look like?
I'm just seeing a younger version of myself when I was a child, and starting to understand that like being touched can be a painful thing.
So I invite you, the powerful woman that you are today, to, in your mind's eye, go sit with this young girl, sit with this little girl. Just gonna sit down in front of her, look her in the eyes, let her know that you're here for her, let her know that you're going to take care of her, let her know that you love her, let her know that you won't let anything bad happen to her. And as you sit there and this love flows out of you to her, ask her what she needs. Just ask her to speak in her child voice and say, what do you need right now from me?
Um, I'm hearing that she needs to be held.
Okay. So can the powerful woman that you are open up your arms to her and invite her into your arms, into an embrace. Just feel if she can come and just go into your embrace. Can you feel that?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and so in this moment, I invite you to hold her and allow that love you have for her to just flow into her. And in your mind's eye, feeling your heart beating against her heart in this embrace. And as her, feeling her heart beat against your heart in this embrace. And the two hearts beating together and just flowing together. And your love and your strength and your power, inviting her to trust you and inviting her to let you hold her and take care of her. How is she receiving this from you?
Very well.
Beautiful. So then I just invite you to carry her up through your body, out of your gut, through your body, all the way up to the throne of your heart. And at the throne of your heart sits all the different aspects of you. You have that rebellious teenager that wanted to kick ass. You have that young woman that set out into the world. You have the wise woman. You have the healer. You have all the different aspects to you, the goddess. Everything else is sitting at that table. And you just carried this child who has been split and separated from them and has been sitting all alone. And you bring her back and you set her down at the table. How is everybody responding to her being reunited?
Beautifully. She's welcomed, honored, adorned.
And how does she feel being there?
Nervous and excited.
Okay. And so if you can give her as much reassurances as you need, if you can all tell her how much they love her and how protective they are going to be of her and how she never has to be alone again, that she has all of these pieces of you there to take care of her and to hold her up and to let her play and let her be a child and let her experience her full authentic self as a child as much as she not needs and wants, and they'll take care of all the other stuff, and that all the other stuff can be handled by others who are more equipped to handle that. How's she feeling about that?
Really good.
Beautiful. Okay. Does it feel okay for you to kind of come back and talk about that experience with me?
Yeah.
How does your gut feel right now?
It feels good. It feels better.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Um, and just for like those who are not watching the video, I was like crying throughout that process.
You have a beautiful cry. I always envy people who have a beautiful cry. Mine looks kind of like, ugh.
Yeah. Well, I can look like that too, but that was very peaceful experience and powerful. And I trust that, whoever needs to hear that will hear that. And I'm just honored to be there and to have that. So thank you. Thank you for sharing that with me.
You're welcome. And so I would just like suggest now, if you ever do start to feel that sensation, usually when we take it out of your gut, it doesn't happen like that anymore. But that child, she's still in there, right? She's still within you. And when sexuality comes up, she may still have like a little bit of a retraction. But what I would then suggest is that you address her directly, right? Like you recognize now that that's who is shy and ashamed and fearful of that whole conversation, and like picture her, address her directly, hold her, tell her like she doesn't have to deal with your sexuality. That's not a part of who she is. She's to run and play and have fun and feel free in her body. And another part of you is going to deal with your sexuality. I'm sure there's a sex goddess in there who is totally equipped to deal with sex as it comes up.
Yeah, that's amazing. I'm excited to be in an experience where I get to do that now. So I'll let you know how it goes.
Can't wait.
Yeah, thank you so much. Um, Okay, so just breathing back into this interview process now.
Yeah.
Mm. What is your biggest personal challenge as a sex therapist?
Mm. I, um, you know, I find that as long as I leave my ego and my conscious thought out of it, um, it doesn't feel like there's any challenges at all. Um, because uh, whatever comes is meant to come, right? And so if I have people, if I have a couple in my audience, I'm in my audience, my couple in my office, and they're mad at each other and they're fighting at each other, that needs to come out, in a place where I can help them sort through it. If somebody like storms out angry, that needed to happen. They needed to do that. And so as long as I keep my ego out of it, I don't find it too challenging. It's once when I'm in my ego, when I'm in my conscious part of myself, where I maybe have I done that right? Did I express myself properly? Have I held this person in the most integrity that I possibly can? Have I done more good than harm? All those questions to make sure, that my ego worries about. Um, if I allow that to flow, then I can go into my own rabbit hole. So I need to really work at staying grounded myself and just staying present in my spiritual aspect of who I am. And
Mhm.
then everything just happens as it's meant to, like whatever they're meant to hear and whatever tool that I have that is meant to be shared with them in this moment to help them get to where they need to go, it just comes, right? And so
Mhm.
yeah, so that is it. It's just staying out of that
Mhm.
part of my
Yeah.
head.
I'm just smiling so big. I like deeply resonate with that. And I think it's so beautiful to hear. So, what is a common challenge or issue that you see for your clients that comes up and surfaces? What is a common issue that you experience in your practice?
um, when it comes to sexuality, there's so much stuff, and probably the most, I think, people being able to communicate about these things is the 100% top thing that happens, right? We have not been trained. We do not know how to communicate in our culture when it comes to intimacy. And our primal nervous system becomes activated so quickly in these intimate relationships that we have all resorted back to animals in a way. When we're fighting, we go straight into this fight, flight, or freeze, and we attack or we run or we freeze.
It's like
And
the heat of the moment, like you feel the heat in your body. And yeah, totally.
almost everybody says, I don't even know what we were talking about. It wasn't anything important. It was stupid. It wasn't anything, because they're not fighting about the issue. They're
Mhm.
fighting they're fighting each other's primal urge of fear. The fear comes out, and that comes across as attack, or comes across as withdraw, or comes across as freeze. So it's teaching people, number one, how to communicate, how to bring your nervous system down so that you can meet each other in a rational way and hear each other and hold each other and be there for each other. So getting through that is number one. But the things that bring people to the office, besides the fighting, is quite often women are sexually shut down. They feel numbness, they feel lack of arousal, they feel lack of desire, and more and more and more. And this is talked about less and less, is men are experiencing um, lack of arousal themselves. they're not able to experience arousal. And there seems to be even more shame and even more blame and even more angst around a man who isn't able to achieve an erection. And I try to explain it like, we don't have a problem if a woman doesn't feel aroused. Like if she's not feeling into it, if she isn't feeling sexual desire, we're like, that's kind of acceptable in our culture. But if a man can't get an erection, the woman thinks it has something to do with her beauty or her, or how he feels about her, or that, or he feels like he's not man enough, or she thinks he's not man enough. Like they get into all this cultural blame and like, you know, this ideal that a masculine man has an erection every time he thinks he wants one, and that he can't lose it until he's ready to lose it, kind of thing. And we have to like really, really, really re-educate people on the fact that we all have ebb and flow in our sexuality. And there are ways of working through it, and there are ways of being intimate with each other. And it is normal for erections to come and go. And, you know, we can work on women's numbness and arousal so that they can start to feel that beautiful, juicy flow that I talked about at the beginning when I was 13 years old and I could feel everything. I could feel my pussy from the inside out. We're meant to feel like that. We're meant to walk around like that. And that's one of the things I like to do with women, is to help them feel that way so that they can so that they can meet their partner fully ready if they choose to be sexual with them.
Absolutely. Like just being turned on by life. Like, yeah. To all.
Yeah. Loving your body, loving your pussy, loving your breasts, loving every part of you, and showing that love to your body every day. And it'll light up, it'll turn on. We are meant to be radiant. We are meant to exude this beautiful, radiant love and sexual energy outside of us. It's our power, and we're meant to have that. And we don't see it in very many, you know, culture just like that stuffs us down. It tells us, oh, that's not okay. And we learned it as a child, right? Maybe not quite as traumatically as you learned it, but we all have learned it somewhere, that we need to shut that shit down, because it's like it creates fear in other people and they want to tone you down.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm like having flashbacks of experiences where I have experienced that. Like, for example, it's been reflected to me that I exude sexuality. Like I radiate sex. I'm like oozing it. And I'm like, well, thank you. That's amazing. And then there are times that I've experienced, um, jealousy or envy or whatever it may be, from others for just simply existing
Mm-hmm.
and embodying that. And that's just part of the journey. And I know that we've touched on that already, but we all have our own experiences and engagements with one another surrounding that. So I definitely encourage people to exude their own sexual energy and frequency and own it. And, that's part of why I personally enjoy pushing the edges, because I don't, as much as there's like that little girl that feels like sex can be wrong or painful or whatever, there is the goddess and the powerful woman that you spoke to that also exists, and that's being human. We're multidimensional, like both things can exist. And so as much as that child inside of me exists, I also have this really empowered woman that is embracing her sexuality full force.
Yeah. Yeah. And for any of your listeners that are, like, what do we do with that, that lashback that you get? Like, you will also get men that are attracted to it and don't know how to deal with it, right? You'll get men that like it. It's like, it's like a, beautiful chocolate bar sitting out there that they just want to lick, right? And they sometimes won't approach it appropriately, right?
Mhm.
And And women are afraid of that, and we've been taught, and it's ancestral for us to be afraid of men who are attracted to our sexuality. But there, I just want to say that we don't need to be afraid. We can stand in our power. We are more powerful than that. We
Mhm.
can look them in the eye and we can say, no, this isn't for you, if we don't want to share that with them, and they will retract. Right? We just need to stand in our power. It's when we look like a victim and we look like we're vulnerable that may attract predatory type of people. But if we are powerful and we are strong and we are unafraid, they will retract because they know that we're powerful and that there's nothing they can do to
Mm.
get that if we don't want to give it to them. So that's important, I think, for your listeners to hear as well. And if they are feeling a little bit of fear, to just hold that part of you and love that part of you that feels fear, but let that goddess step forward. Like I often think of Diana, the goddess Diana, and how strong she is, and how she'll look somebody in the eye and just like, yeah,
Mhm.
this is awesome. But like, I choose what I do with this. If I choose to share it, I will. If I don't, I don't. Right?
Exactly. Yeah. Thank you. And you're literally speaking to a part of my reality that's very live right now because I decided literally this week and I subscribed to an OnlyFans page for myself. Are you familiar with OnlyFans?
No.
So it is a platform that has a reputation for nudity and sex and women posting videos and photos of themselves. And so I'm embracing my sexual energy. And for a long time, I've been in fear of people being attracted to me, and I've recoiled and been afraid of all the attention and energy that comes my way. And now I'm in a space where I feel very strong and empowered in that. And I signed up for OnlyFans because I'm like, okay, people are drawn to me. Like, I want to embrace this and show love and bridge gaps and open up dialogues and, be that beacon of light, for sexuality and sexual expression because we already are doing that in our own ways. It's just a matter of resisting or embracing what it is that we are. And so I'm literally this week signed up for OnlyFans and I'm embracing, love over fear in regards to that draw.
It's so beautiful. I love that. I think we need more and more and more humans who are willing to be that beacon. And what I love is that the beacon is just sending out love, right? Because we have had so many of that predatory kind of behavior create anger, create hate, create um, you know resistance, to create like withdrawal, fear, all those things. But if we send out the beacon of love even to those people, to show them the way, to show them that sex isn't about overpowering somebody who doesn't want to be overpowered. Sex isn't about harming somebody's spirit and soul. It's about love, right? And that if they can hear that, um, we're changing the world.
Yeah, absolutely. I believe that. Um, so if we're talking about a lot the cultural norms and we've spoken to some different varieties of humans, and so I'm curious for like the average person that wants to explore their sexuality more, what is something that average person could do wherever they may be on their journey to start to shift into that love over fear and embracing their sexual being, their god or their goddess? Like, what would you tell that person to start that process?
Well, there's so much out there now, right? There's so much available. And you know, I think you do have to kind of do your research. I think it's really important to do your research. I think if you're in a relationship and you're thinking about like shifting the paradigm of your relationship and opening it up, or if you have, you know, if you're a woman, identified woman who has decided that you want to like maybe open yourself up sexually to other women, or a man who wants to open himself up to other men, or whatever the area you want to explore. If you're just a couple that wants to explore a little bit of kink, I think first of all, do your research, and I think finding legitimate coaches, finding legitimate programs, finding legitimate places to go to in the first place, because you can accidentally wander into some dark place, right? In your desire to explore. So you know, there are some like really legitimate people out there who are talking about sexuality, and I suggest that they just start to kind of like go online and look and see who seems real, who seems okay, you know. And if you know, go on a couple of discovery calls with people, find out if you really resonate with who they are, if they really make sense to you, and maybe just have a couple conversations with somebody about where to go, where's the next step, what to do. If you're in a partnership, start talking, talk, start being vulnerable, start listening. Listen and validate where your partner is. Allow your partner to express who they are without judgment. Allow yourself to discover who you are without judgment, you know. So start doing some of those things, but I think it really, really helps to have somebody to reflect it to, and for that to be reflected back in a loving, caring way, so that you know what you need to do and where you need to go, because there's just so much available.
Yeah, on that note, I was gonna say I'm imagining myself as a listener thinking like, okay, I'm gonna Google like sex workers, and there's so much out there. Do you have any like direct resources, recommendations aside from obviously yourself? And I'm for those who are listening, there are links in the show notes to get in touch with Karyn. But I'm curious, do you have any like resources or books or like people that you could just throw into this conversation for whoever might be looking for that?
Sure. Well, one of my favorites is Layla Martin, who I did take my coaching certification with, and she's promoting her Vita program right now, which is a monthly subscription program. So if you Google Layla Martin, I'm sure you'll be able to find lots of resources around her. Um, I also um, I also really like Brené Brown. I think, you know, if you are doing some Googling, I think maybe sexuality, sex and intimacy coaching, some of those kinds of things, because there are so many. I have like so many friends in this community that it's hard for me to like even like point towards one, except like Layla Martin, who seems to be kind of like the beacon for me. Esther Perel is really good if you're like looking at your relationship, and if you're grappling with the idea of perhaps if there's been some infidelity, like she's always a good one. Yeah, those are kind of the ones that come to me off the top of my head. But um, yeah, there's a lot of good things out there.
Good, thank you for that. Um, and then one of my like, well, first, let me ask you, I have one more question for you, and then I have a question that I'm asking all of my guests to kind of wrap up the episode with. So, what are some things people should be aware of if they are interested in exploring relationships different from the cultural norm that we have been discussing?
Mhm. What are some things they should be aware of?
Mm-hmm.
I think back to communication, communication. If you're in a couplehood, because you know, if you're feeling it, and you want to bring it up to your partner, chances are they are going to respond in fear at first, because we have been socialized to believe that monogamy, male female relationships, is the safest. That, you know, all of our fairy tales, everything is around that being the fairy tale ending, that being the answer. And so if you're wanting to bring it up, recognize that your partner is very likely to react in fear, and fear is often masked by anger, and that can create an attack kind of thing. So setting the stage to having the conversation is like really super important, and kind of like setting some boundaries around the conversation, around, listening and mirroring back, like I would, just talking about how you want the communication to go so that you can get through it, and then give your partner time to absorb what you're saying.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and so that they can come back again in a place of safety where they can talk to you about what it is that you're wanting to explore. So like, yeah, so expect there to be some resistance, expect there to be jealousy. Like, jealousy is a normal human emotion. And
It's
sometimes,
one of the quickest reactive emotions that we have as humans. Like, I remember learning this, like, we just respond with it, like, very quickly. I think anger and jealousy are two emotions that almost like overcome our humans at times.
yeah, I think it's fear and anger are the two, right? And it's usually fear, and it on top of fear comes anger, or comes withdrawal, right? Like, it's the fight, flight, or freeze. So it's first it's fear, and then it's everything else. And jealousy is kind of like what we kind of culturally turn it into, right? But it's actually fear,
Mm.
fear of abandonment, fear of betrayal, fear of losing everything that you have, right? And so all that, it's a big thing. You've got a relationship, maybe you have a family, maybe there's children involved, maybe there's like financial implications. That's a lot for somebody to like risk.
Mhm.
And so a lot of people just stuff it, or they don't want to talk about it. So like, recognize that that is definitely going to come up. um, and you can take it slow. You can start with just talking about the fantasy. You can start with, like, reading erotica around the fantasy. You can write your own erotica around the fantasy. You can like do role playing around the fantasy. Like, there's lots of things you can do that don't take you outside of your relationship to start with, just to get accustomed with it and to discover, does this actually land in my body the way I would like it to, right? Oh no, your kitty's coming to join us.
Full circle.
Yeah.
There's lots of pussy power happening here.
Exactly. Yeah. So I think that's the biggest thing, is to like recognize that they're probably going to, and you have to like really set up the conversation. You have to like really have some structure around the conversation. You need to expect that there are lots of things that will come up, and have a plan for jealousy. Have a plan for like how you're going to respond. One of my favorite books around that topic is More Than Two. And I can't remember the author at the moment, but Google More Than Two. And that is my favorite resource around, other than monogamous relationships. It goes into all the different other styles, and it really, really handles all the different aspects to it quite well.
That's beautiful. Thank you for that share. And I can put a link I'm going to write that down, More Than Two. So I'll put a link for that in the show notes as well. Um, final question would be, what is your best dating, sex, relationship advice just across the board? What would you want everybody to just know?
um, the thing that comes to mind again is communication.
Mhm.
And one of my friends who has taken ISTA training, I'm not sure if you're familiar with that. It's like the International School of Temple Arts. One of the things she learned from there is this communication tool in like the early stages of dating. And I've tried it myself. It's like really good. And it's a communication tool where you just like put it all out there. And I think it's so important to like, if you put it all out there, and if the person rejects you, if the person doesn't want you, that's good, because like, who wants to like go through months of relationship to only find out that you're not right for each other, or that you conflict in many ways, which you may still find out, but communication is really helpful from the beginning. And it's, and there's the structure around it. It sounds like BDSM. So it's BDSM is the letters that you follow. And it isn't about BDSM, it's about a communication tool. But the B is boundaries. And to first of all, just like first talk about your boundaries, like let people know what your boundaries are, and like go within and find out what your boundary is. Because quite often we wait to hear what the other person wants and desires, and then we kind of like mold our boundaries around them. And that's not the way to be, because then you feel resentful, and then you feel angry, and then you feel hurt, you feel harmed, but you've already given them the go ahead, right? And so start off with your boundaries, right? Like, maybe you don't want to be with somebody who is having sex with other people, or maybe you don't want, maybe it has to do with, whatever your boundaries are, right? So like really go within and explore them. So the D is desires. So BD, boundaries, desires. What do you desire? What do you desire from this relationship? What do you desire from this connection? What do you desire tonight? What do you desire long term? Like, what are you looking for? Really, and if tonight is like, I don't want to have sex tonight, but I sure would like to make out with you. Or, I think I might want to have sex with you tonight if things work out, but like, we definitely need to make sure that we're careful with, with our protection, or whatever it is. So talk about your desires. I'm desiring a long-term monogamous relationship. I'm desiring to explore polyamory. I'm desiring a casual relationship, whatever it is. So work on that. So BDS, S is sexual health. So talk about your sexual health. I've been tested, or I have only had sex with condoms. I'm very, casual with sex. I don't use condoms all the time. I use, whatever it is, I advocate for people to be careful with their sexual fluids, but, it's important to be honest with somebody about your sexual health, right up from the start. And that may cause that little girl to go, I don't want to talk about that on a first date. But it's something we need to talk about on a regular basis. And M, BDSM, the M is like meaning. What does this mean? What are potential things meaning? If I make out with you tonight, does that mean that I want to see you again tomorrow, or doesn't necessarily mean that? If we do have sex, does that mean that I think we're in a relationship, or does that just mean that we've had casual sex? What meaning are we placing on this alliance? What meaning do we have with different things? If we were to have sex, that would mean to me that you love me. So make sure you know that before you decide to have sex with me, or whatever it is that you have within your body. So it's important to carefully think about that before you have the conversation, and invite them to respond as to like how they feel about those things. And then the last one is like BDSM and then -R. And the R is for relationship status. Like, where are you? Like, are you divorced? I have a primary partner and I'm looking for somebody to date outside of my primary partnership. I'm in a relationship with a woman, but now I want to be in a relationship with a man as well. Or I'm looking for a third to join my coupleness, or whatever it is, right? Like, what is your relationship status? And be very clear and be very honest about it, because that's probably one of the things that sometimes people don't want to tell on when they first meet somebody, and then it's unfair to them. Like, what are they getting into? So to me, that's like, everybody should have conversations like that when they're dating or in relationships.
Yeah, I love that. Conversations like that excite me. Like, I get excited and I love that shit. Like, I want to have those conversations. And for the most part, I practice already all of those things except for the meaning portion, which is so beautiful. My mind is expanding as we speak, because we're so unique in our humans and have so many different expressions and perceptions of what things mean. My color red could look completely different from what you decide your color red is, but they're both red, but they mean different things to the both of us, so that's
So true.
amazing. So thank you for enlightening myself and whoever is listening to this. That's extremely helpful.
Yeah, I think you're very, very right about that. I don't know how many times, like, shouldn't he have, like, he did this, like, what did he think I was gonna think, or what, like, we have this impression that we have this meaning we place to things that is unspoken, and we consider it absolute. and it clearly isn't. So we need to talk
Mm.
about it.
Mhm. Well, thank you so much. This has been, wow, what an amazing conversation and experience. I truly feel blessed to have you here and to have you on. And I'm just curious, is there anything else that you want to share with the listeners or say before we part ways?
Nothing really that we haven't talked about. I just want to emphasize once again that we are meant to be sexual people. We're meant to feel our bodies. We're meant to feel the sexuality within us. Who we want to share that with, whether we want to share that with anybody, that is completely individual and personal. But if you are shut down, if you are not feeling your sexuality, it is something that you can absolutely explore and feel, and then it's your choice as to what you want to do with it. So I think
Yeah,
that's the message I want to leave
absolutely.
people with.
Yeah, thank you. And I feel like just reiterating for the sake of being like super thorough, communicate, communicate, communicate.
Absolutely, absolutely. And and if anybody is feeling any kind of triggering from anything that we talked about, I think it's just really important to do some self-soothing. It's really important to give yourself love and to give yourself a place of safety in your body. It's in your body. It's not in your head. Find
Mhm.
that safe place. Find that power woman. Find that goddess. Find that wise woman. Find that healer, or whoever it is within you, and nurture, 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 love, love, love. Because you can self-soothe. You can get through it, and
Yeah,
these conversations can be triggering, and I just want to acknowledge that. But you are completely capable of self-soothing.
absolutely. You are loved.
Mm-hmm.